On this episode of the Cinema Shame podcast, James and Allan take a machete to the death-filled jungle that is their unwatched movies of 2003. Will they survive to share their plate again? Or will they falter, consumed by the unfathomable horror of a 4-foot Gary Oldman? Let the 2003 Shamedown begin.
This is the Cinema Shame podcast, sponsored by DVD Netflix, but don't try to rent anything from them anymore because they're not sending you the envelopes. We're just going to keep saying it's sponsored by in memoriam for as long as we feel like it. As usual, my name is James. I don't know, it's always James. I don't know why I would say it's usually James, but it's the same tandem. I'm James. That's
sometimes
Allan.
It's Jay.
Sometimes.
It's Jay.
Well, see, I have a first name problem in that I'm James David Patrick, and then I don't even go by any of them, and I just add another one in there. And people call, like, at the doctor's office, people say, "Hey, David, me, Patrick, James." It doesn't matter. I'll just turn my head, and if you'd like gesture, I'll come. This is the 2003 Shamedown episode. That's
the one that nearly killed us, folks.
I was going to say that's significant because it is a larger episode than our recent Shelfies, and as Allan so kindly put it, it may have killed us if we had gone on any longer with this year. There really wasn't a whole lot of nice to say about 2003, and in our experience, we just kept sending angry tweets. Is it I'm just going to call them tweets because I'm not dealing with that nonsense.
Yeah.
In going through the movies, we have this, hey, how does 2003 feel to you? 2003 felt like a piece of shit. And, but only at the surface. The more I went through the list of movies that were released this year, I realized I was a big fan of a lot of smaller movies that came out that year, and I spent a lot of time in art house cinema watching foreign movies, independent movies, and my memories of the Hollywood movies of that year was just abominable. And the more Hollywood movies that I watched for this particular podcast, it reinforced, compounded exponentially that concept that Hollywood just checked out during this period of time. So, like, I'm thinking,
and I think,
like, Station Agent and The Cooler, the Shape of Things, Intermission, Badass, State of Play, Inspector Gadget 2. Just seeing if you're all paying attention, but
well, I think 2003 exemplified something we'd already experienced when we did 2002, is that because of who we were in that year, we pretty much saw everything that we wanted to see that year. Like, there were, like, if we didn't see a movie in 2003, it was because we probably did not want to see it. And so that was pretty much all we had left over.
Have we not grown?
Yeah.
Have we not changed?
Go Gadget bubblegum.
Bubblegum?
I'm paranoid about recording this episode, and I apologize to everyone in advance, because I know many of you, when we do our top 5, are going to find mine absolutely appalling. Like, there are movies that people, like, literally consider the worst movies of all time in my top 5 list of 2003. So I warn you in advance, I am going to praise movies that you think are terrible, and I'm going to shit on a movie that you love. So just you know that going in.
This is our Red Band trailer.
Yeah.
There are movies like Kill Bill, Lord of the Rings, Pirates of the Caribbean, School of Rock. They were big movies that came out that year that I really enjoyed.
I had a top 10 that I had to narrow down, and so, like, the 5 that I cut could easily be in another top 5. Like, it wasn't like a year where, like, I was struggling to find what are 5 movies from this year I liked. There are a lot of movies from this year I really liked. The problem was I saw them in 2003.
Yeah, and it was a very top-heavy year. There were a bunch of big movies, and then there was a lot of just flotsam. And speaking of flotsam, fun fact, I actually saw Love Actually on a group of people that included Carrie Strug at a theater in Harvard Square. She was dating some guy that went to law school with her, and I never actually found out how the date went. I've always been curious, like, did you have a nice date with Carrie Strug? American icon? Just a thing. I couldn't think of too many nice things to say about 2003 off the top of my head, so I Googled good things that happened in 2003. What do you think I came up with? Do you have anything good that happened in 2003?
That's a period of time where I really can't remember anything. I can't tie anything to a specific year.
Okay.
Like, it was 2 years after 2001, which is a year everyone remembers for sad reasons. But I feel like 2003, I can't. If you were asking me to pinpoint something that happened that year, I'd be like, nope, no idea.
Okay, well, I've got something for you.
Okay.
The Human Genome Project completed, and it mapped 99% of the human DNA.
Not 100%.
99. I was confused because it said it completed, but then it was at 99. I'm like, I feel like 100% is completion. You're still stuck in that like wheel spinning stage at the end.
Yeah. It's like when you know it's gone long enough, you know that it's fucked up, and you're just gonna have to do it all over again.
Yeah, you're gonna have to push the power button down for 10 seconds to reboot that shit because you're stuck. Also, the invention of the do not call list was 2003, which is a nice concept, but I'm not so sure it's ever really worked out for anyone.
It definitely hasn't in Canada. Literally, the only phone calls I get are scam phone calls.
Let's move on to our top 5 movies in 2003, as always, to give the listeners a baseline for our criticisms and taste making that we're about to embark upon. You can go first because I want to hear all of the squeals on after your list.
Okay, so mine begins at number 5, which what I think is the most underrated of the Coen brothers movies. And that's Intolerable Cruelty, which I know a lot of people think is mid-tier at best, maybe one of their worst at worst. But I love it. I really love this mode of Coen brothers, this sort of like silly comedy, trying to,
This has an asterisk next to it, except Lady Killers.
Yeah. I just think it works for what it really wants to be. And also, most significantly, I don't think Catherine Zeta-Jones has ever been sexier in a film than she has been in this. And that's a pretty high bar. And so for that alone, that was enough to put it in my top 5. My number 4 is Down with Love, which I think is a criminally underrated movie. It's one of those movies where I feel like the people who like it still dismiss it just because they can't accept that it is successfully doing exactly what it wants to do. It is working on exactly the level that it wants to work at. And I just, because that is something that people don't think needed to be done in 2003, they just dismiss the project as a whole. But as someone who really likes those like Rock Hudson and Doris Day movies, I think this is a pinpoint perfect parody of them. And I think Renee Zellweger's monologue has never been topped.
I think more than parody, though. I think that's a little...
Yeah.
Undercutting it just a little bit because it's
homage
and very much asserting itself as one of those movies, in as much as it still pokes fun of the individual elements that made them exactly what they are.
Yeah. So that's a big one that I loved. Number 3 is Charlie's Angels Full Throttle, which the thing that I love the most about it, and I think it's the reason why it was so hated when it came out, is that all of McGee's visual and specific references are all from musicals. So it's supposed to be an action movie, but it's clearly a musical at heart. And that's why, for me, it actually plays like a Bollywood movie. And if you've never seen those and you're not into them, you won't get that. But like, having become a big Bollywood film since I originally saw this movie, it's the only way I can watch it now. It has totally the same vibe. It's sort of like it is unashamed to be itself in a way that other movies would be very much ashamed of. And I think that's something that I really am attracted to. The thing that I find hilarious is that the same dudes who were talking about how this movie was the worst movie of all time when it came out have gone on to just rapturously praise the Fast and Furious movies, even though at this point they are basically operating on the same level of this movie in terms of just sort of the complete, like, we don't give a fuck when it comes to realism of the action sequences. And so that's why I find it funny that sort of society is caught up to now we're actually celebrating what Charlie's Angels Full Throttle was doing. But what 20 years ago, people were like, fuck no, we can't do this. And I like to say I was on the vanguard. And that's why I don't fully appreciate the Fast and the Furious movies, is because to me, Charlie's Angels Full Throttle already did it first. And for number 2, Carrie Strug's favorite movie apparently is because I actually love Actually. I know I'm not supposed to. I know every Christmas I'm told I'm not supposed to. I know you all really want me to reread that one Lindy Booth article over and over again, thinking that at some point it's going to change my mind and make me not love this movie. But I'm sorry, guys, it's not going to happen. I love Actually, and I know why you don't like it, and I don't give a fuck. I still love Actually. And my number 1 movie, Kill Bill, Volume 1.
Not too long ago, I was quite the professional. My friends and I, we were the creme de la creme in an exclusive industry. And we all worked for this man, Bill. Then one day, I decided to leave.
If you actually view Kill Bill Volume 1 and Volume 2 as one movie, I think that's probably my second favorite Tarantino of all time after Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I think it just operates as a perfect genre exploration. I don't think it's going to be topped, and it's perfect filmmaking. He's speechless, folks.
I was thinking we have one in common. Which one?
Well, it can't be Kill Bill because that would be too obvious, wouldn't it?
It would be too obvious.
So either it's the really obvious one, or maybe it's Down with Love. I don't know. I could see you going that way.
All right.
Hello, baby.
Hey, baby.
I just popped by for a little sex on a car.
So let's start with number 5. And this, I would have bet everything I own that this was not on your list. Open Range, directed by Kevin Costner.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think it's one of the finest example of a sincere, modern, Western genre movie. It's a lovely piece of filmmaking, and it's the Kevin Costner movie that should be considered where Dances with Wolves is in terms of like actual filmmaking. Number 4, Down with Love, Peyton Reed, for all the reasons that you already mentioned. This is where we out you as un-Canadian, because number 3 is the saddest music in the world from Guy Madden.
I tried.
I find his aesthetic fascinating even when it doesn't work, and to me this is the one that works totally everything that he's imagining in his head. From every small detail is working towards his unique personality in this film. It's full of terrific eccentricities and performances, and I just wish we could get you on board with the Guy Madden thing, but we're going to work on it. It might happen yet.
Are we going to do the won't be talking about this episode?
We can do won't be talking about.
Okay, well then I'll be quiet.
Number 2 is Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World by Peter Weir, because I can't think of another epic that was made in the last 20 years. I mean, that to me, that is epic filmmaking, a la David Lean. There's nothing, I can't say anything bad about that movie, and Peter Weir's a genius.
Yeah.
And number 1 is Lost in Translation from Sofia Coppola.
そしてテーブルの上にはサントリーウイスキーがあります。わかりますね。感情を込めてゆっくりとカメラを見て優しく、そしてあなたの古い友達に会うように言ってください。カサブランカのボギーのように君の瞳に乾杯。サントリータイム。
He wants you to turn, look in camera. Okay?
That's all he said?
Yes. Turn to camera.
That movie meant something to me when I saw it in the theater, and it has, as I've watched it over the years, it has shifted. I've come to appreciate new things about it, and
some people have reevaluated it negatively. It actually, when I talked about having another like top 5, it made that list, so it definitely would have made my top 10. I definitely can appreciate. I don't think it's her best film. I still would rate the Virgin Suicides as my favorite, but that could just because it was my first exposure to her work, so it was the one that hit me the hardest.
And I should mention that just like you in a past episode, I watched a movie for this Shamedown that takes a spot on this list.
So are you going to reveal it later on at the end?
Later on.
I did try to watch the saddest music in the world for this episode, and I actually have a bigger investment in it than just being Canadian, because one of my best friends in the world was actually a dancer in the saddest music in the world when she was, I think, 15 or 16, when she was living in Winnipeg, and she tells me the story, and I totally believe her, is that they had to dance barefoot on a cold concrete floor in the middle of a Winnipeg winter. So their feet were freezing. So in between takes, they would lie on the ground with their feet up in the air, and Isabella Rossellini would come along and rub their feet to warm them up. So
it's a feel-good story.
my best friend, one of my best friends in the world, had her feet rubbed by Isabella Rossellini. And yeah, that I'm dropping that name, folks. I am doing that. But even though I have that emotional connection to this movie, once Maria Medeiros, is that her name, or once her character said about something about her tapeworm, that was the moment it lost me. It didn't take long. I think that's the first 5 minutes of the movie. But once she said that, I was like, yep, nope, I'm out. And I think I watched another half hour of it before I finally was like, yeah, I'm never going to get on this movie's vibe. It's never going to work for me. I love that the people who love it. And I know people who are very passionate about this movie, and I totally can see why they see that. I don't see it.
Well, it is certainly a movie that has a wavelength. And I like it's
a gorgeous movie. I will say it is a gorgeous movie, but I just couldn't get into the story.
Well, I feel like Guy Madden risks that with every movie he makes. He's
I felt good because after I watched it, I went to Toronto and got to hang out with my friend who is in it. And she told me she doesn't like it either. So that made me feel good that my friend who is actually in this movie doesn't like the movie either.
Well, I'm not going to be talking about is sort of it's a conflicted thing because I stopped watching a bunch of movies that I really wouldn't talk about. So instead of kind of shorting it and not talking about a movie I haven't fully seen, I'm going to not talk about In Hell, which would be Jean-Claude Van Damme's third collaboration with Ringo Lam. Guy kills my wife, I get sent to prison for ever movie, which they just yada the whole trial, and there's corruption with the guy that actually killed her wife, so he gets sent to prison, and then it's bleak and bleaker from there on. And there is The movie's redeeming quality, and it's not any of the fight scenes, because the fight scenes are not interesting at all. What we did get, however, is a magical moth that visits him while he's in solitary. And his wife's force ghost visits him at one point too, when he finds himself and realizes he's not actually going to fight. He was only fighting because they made him part of the machine. Yeah, and in the fact that I felt the need to watch this because I am a huge Van Damme fan, and I'm a big Ringo Lam fan. Yeah, you just expected some of the fun that Ringo Lam puts into his Hong Kong productions to kind of carry over, but this is just Dullsville. So I'm not going to be talking about In Hell.
So we're silent now.
We know what's coming. We don't want to do it.
We have to talk. We have to talk about our shared shame, and whenever I ask people to be on this podcast, I always make sure to tell them the shame is always on us for not having seen the movie yet. The shame is never on the movie for existing. Ignore that for the film we're about to talk about. This is a film that should feel a lot of shame for existing, and it's very rare for films to actually upset me. And when this was over, I was actually angry. So that's what we're talking about.
I would like to
now.
revisit before we announce the title of the film. I don't think we've announced the title of the shared shame. Anyway, why did we pick this? Was this just?
I think it was just we were looking at a bunch of different titles and we were like, haha, this is a famous bad movie.
Right.
We'll
because
have fun
we
with
always
this one.
feel like we can redeem a really bad movie. There's usually reason to say, you know what, this is sort of misunderstood. There's something to enjoy about a notoriously bad movie. I would like to state for the fact that we have found the movie that broke both of us.
Yeah.
That movie is Tiptoes, directed by Matthew Bright.
Carol and Stephen's life together was perfect.
I've got to get going.
Right this second. Hey, baby.
Hey, sweetie. I love you.
There's one small problem.
Hi, I'm Ralph. I'm his brother. We're twins.
Are your parents,
Yeah.
It can tear them apart.
I think you gotta let me know that everyone in your family's a midget.
They're not midgets, Carol. They're dwarfs.
I watched it, and we'll rewind to the actual nuts and bolts in a second, but while we're focusing on this good-bad thing, and I was just dumbfounded about how it got made, and there's some story behind it that we'll get to after we tar and feather this thing. It's inexplicable what happens on the screen in terms of the filmmaking, the creative decisions made. I can only think of a couple things about this movie technically in terms of the way it was produced that makes sense. And that's taking into full consideration that there are thousands of decisions made.
Yeah. And I think the thing that made me really angry, and this is going to be me being a bit political right now, but because you're hearing my voice, you are not aware that I am a short man. I am 5'2", which means I'm only about 4 inches taller than it legally takes to be classified as a little person. And because of this, I tend to be a little more sensitive than most people when it comes to height casting in films. Like, I'm always the asshole who points out that, Hugh Jackman is great. He's also a foot too fucking tall to play Wolverine. Like, Wolverine is 5'2" in the comic books. You don't cast a 6'2" actor to play him. It's the same reason why I was so pissed off with the Batman, where you have the Penguin, who is canonically my height, and you cast the Banshees of Insurance. Inchiri, that guy. Say his name. You know what I'm talking about. Yes. Colin Farrell.
See, I didn't see
they cast
the
him
Batman.
as the Penguin. It's not. I didn't like it. It's not good. But one of the things I really didn't like about it was how they took this really distinctive and sort of funny short villain and just made him into a generic gangster with Colin Farrell doing a Robert De Niro impersonation. And it's like, why would you take this imaginative character and turn it into the least imaginative thing possible? And that's because they want things to be cool, and short people can't be cool. It only tall, dudes can be, it's like the big complaint about the Jack Reacher films is that
short
Tom
people
Cruise.
can't be gray and brooding. Come on.
Yeah. And so if you don't know about Tiptoes, the thing that made it infamous before it was even released, and it sat on the shelf for quite a while, is that they cast Gary Oldman as a dwarf. And people might go, "Oh, what's the big deal?" Like you have the Hobbit movies, and where regular size actors are playing dwarf. But the difference is that they have him in a cast with other actual little people, so he's walking around on his knees in these scenes with actual little people. And to me, like, it was like if you made a movie like Raisin in the Sun, and then cast Gary Oldman in the Sidney Poitier part and put him in blackface. To me, it was that level of offensive. Gary Oldman actually does a pretty good job with what he's given, but he should not be there at all. And the thing that sort of really makes it hilarious is that the film has the actor who should have been cast in his part in it, but they have him cast in a different part that's written so terribly that you actually go, why is this actor who should have been playing Gary Oldman's part in this movie?
Before we start rolling down this hill, let's give the audience a few facts about the movie. I wrote down, as plainly as possible, the facts about the way this movie is presented to us. In case you haven't seen it, fact 1, Gary Oldman plays a little person. The subsection fact 1 is that he's also the only performer that's given a role that he's good in. We will get back to that in a second. Matthew McConaughey plays his twin brother. Their father is the dwarf from Twin Peaks. I mention this because Twin Peaks will come up later in the show.
Michael Anderson,
Kate Beckinsale plays Matthew McConaughey's fiance. They're not married in the beginning. They get married later.
They're engaged.
In the first 5 minutes of the movie, he says no thanks to a Kate Beckinsale blowjob.
that film already, like, it sort of like, in terms of believability, as soon as that happened, I was like, oh, okay, whatever.
It's sort of a damning character trait for a guy that we're supposed to feel like he becomes a raging asshole, but we're still supposed to feel empathy for him, but we're just like, dude, you turned it down. That's there's no coming back from that. Next point, Peter Dinklage plays a raging misogynist French Marxist who rides a motorcycle. None of those particular characteristics benefits the story in any way. Patricia Arquette has cornrows and various other inexplicable hair permutations.
It was so terrible, while at the same time, I don't think Kate Beckinsale and Patricia Arquette have ever been more attractive in a movie. And I think that bothered me on a visceral level, the fact that these two extremely attractive women are so hot in a movie that does not deserve their hotness.
Does not deserve the hotness. I was dying to hear some other comments about this movie, like how people reacted, if it was even remotely as strongly as I did. Someone made the wonderful observation that Patricia Arquette borrowed the hairstyles from various Gary Oldman films. She had the cornrows from True Romance and whatever Dracula was doing at one point. The little fun connection there with Gary Oldman's hairstylist. David Allen Greer is in the movie.
For two shots.
And if I remember correctly, he has sex with Bridget Powers. And if you're not aware of Bridget Powers, she is the porn star with dwarfism.
And she's actually really good in this.
She is. She's a good actor, and I've seen her in other stuff too, but I had to look forward to find it. But The film also features Ed Gale, a.k.a. Howard the Duck, and stationed in Bogus Journey.
Yep.
There are reasons to think it had its heart and head in the right place. Unfortunately, neither become true by film's end.
And I think that's one thing that added, to me, that added insult to the injury, is that if this film had worked, if they had cast Peter Dinklage in the Gary Oldman part and just gotten rid of that whole subplot with him and Arquette, I think the story could have worked if they had managed to improve inexplicable character choices that Matthew McConaughey and Kate Beckinsale make, because their character decisions make no sense. The only other movie I could think of with a cast like this is Under the Rainbow, with Chevy Chase and Carrie Fisher, because usually if you have a bunch of little people together, it's a comedy about how debauched they are, and that this movie actually attempts to show them having real lives, like real people, which is what they are.
Mm-hmm. And there are moments where you're like, this could have worked. The movie, the dinner scene I'm thinking of specifically, is a little heavy-handed for what it wants to accomplish, but it's not bad.
No, there was so much in here that could have worked, but they fucked it up with all of their decisions that it almost Hollywood since hasn't well, now we can't make another movie like this because it'll be as terrible as Tiptoes. And it's no, they just fucked up making Tiptoes. Let's try this again.
Matthew Bright, his director's cut was apparently 2.5 hours long.
I totally believe it, yeah.
And he turned in the cut and was immediately fired from the film by the film's producers. After it was taken away from him, he asked to have his name removed from the film, and he only managed to get his name removed as writer. But because he wasn't yet part of the DGA, he had to leave his name on as director. As far as I could tell, digging through some of the anecdotal research I found about this movie, that director's cut aired once at Harry Knowles' Butt-Numb-a-thon in 2003, when it was then removed from Matthew Bright and recut and shown at Sundance the following year, where Matthew Bright went up to introduce the film and did not introduce and only went on a very long tirade about the film's producers and how this was not the movie he wanted to make. He was removed from the stage by security. And this explains some of the questions I had about the movie, specifically regarding the Peter Dinklage character. They seem to be there at all for comic relief. They are like a chorus that kind of wanders through the scene every now and then, so that it's not so serious. So if you're looking at this as there's an hour and a half more out there, whatever. Yeah. You can start to see how it was formed as this ensemble cast, and it was re-edited to focus strictly on the quote-unquote stars of the movie, Oldman, Beckinsale, and McConaughey. Knowing that, do I want to watch a 150-minute cut of Tiptoes?
I do not.
No. It sounds like I'm trying to make excuses for what it is now, but I don't see any way to get this to being a even decent movie.
Well, this will come up again because one of my other movies has a similar backstory. But I think Tiptoes is definitely a case where I'm guessing that the director's cut will only exacerbate the issues that this movie has, rather than sort of solve them.
Well, and that's the thing. I didn't want more of the Patricia Arquette and Dinklage characters.
I would also argue that it actually undermines what I think the last shot that the film is aiming towards. Because, okay, spoiler, the last shot is that Kate Beckinsale kisses Gary Oldman, and you get the sense that he is going to take over for his brother in raising this child that Matthew McConaughey, for reasons that are never actually explained by the script, doesn't want to have anything to do with. And I think that was actually undermined by the relationship between Dinklage and Arquette, because we're basically like, oh my God, it's a beautiful woman with a dwarf. Meanwhile, throughout the entire film, you've had a sexual relationship between a beautiful woman and a dwarf. So any power that moment might have had is lost because we've already seen it in the movie.
Mm-hmm. There is more intended. Like, it was supposed to be a full-on sex scene at the end of the movie. And who's to say that even if it's the end of the movie, like, we don't know exactly what
the end would have been,
what went on beyond, because it's not even a clear ending. You have this kiss, and the movie just
goes to credits,
to black. They're okay, quick, turn it off before we spend more money on it.
And as soon as I saw it, like, as soon as that scene started, I was like, they better fucking not. They better fucking not. And then they did, and then it goes to credits, and I was like, you fucking assholes. If anybody in watching this movie should be cheering, it should be me. But instead, like, my reaction is like, fuck this movie and fuck the people who made it. So I think that shows you just how much they fucked up. Mm-hmm. Like, it absolutely, like, I ended up, like, I was too mad to end up reading what the backstory of the production history was. But I totally guessed that there was a much longer director's cut.
Oh, it definitely had that feeling.
It definitely has that feeling, yeah.
And when it ended, I had the very same reaction as you. And my wife was reading at the time, and she looks up and she's like, "That's the end of the movie?" And I said, "I don't want to talk about it."
And the worst part is that this was the only film I couldn't source any other way. So this is the only movie that I paid to actually watch.
I rented this from DVD Netflix. And
so you did pay for it. You did pay for it.
Technically, I did, but I think I rented like 30 movies that month, so pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, it cost me $4.99 Canadian.
It should be noted that Matthew Bright has made a movie that I did enjoy in Freeway.
I haven't seen it. I actually own the Vinegar Syndrome release that recently came out, and I might give it a watch. But at the same time, I'm sort of like even like if it's anything at all like each other, like, I'm not sure I can handle it.
And apparently, he's not directing anymore. I wonder if Tiptoes had anything.
Yeah.
Well, my ex-old man, Jerome, he used to whittle wood jewelry. See, he whittled all this for me. He even whittled me a wedding ring. See the splinter? Then he turned really evil. There's a truck driver, and those guys are all on crank, and there's this, transsexual prostitutes. And anyway, he flipped out and thought I was an alien walk-in. You don't want to hear this stuff?
No, me too.
What?
Okay, you should do your highest unseen, because mine's just going to piss people off. So we'll get yours in.
We need to go happy.
Yeah.
It's not happy is all relative. So let's talk about my highest unseen on Letterboxd IMDb, which is Bong Joon-ho's Memories of Murder.
이 순사밥도 먹는 거고 내가 다른 거 몰라도 이 사람 보는 눈은 있다는 거 알아?
Highly praised director of Parasite, The Host, and Snowpiercer, among others. This movie is a police procedural set in 1986 in the Gyeonggi province of South Korea. You will have to pardon my pronunciation of everything I say in this podcast, because I think all of my movies are foreign films. And none of them are in languages that I have any understanding of. So, we're starting in South Korea, and I'm going to butcher these names first. So, the police find a body of a young woman. She's been raped and murdered. Months later, they find another girl murdered under similar circumstances, and the rumors of a serial killer and rapist start to spread among the small population of the province. the police establish a special task force to investigate the crimes. So this movie is a genre masterpiece. I don't think I use masterpiece very often, and I barely given any movies 5 stars in Letterboxd. I am strictly 4.5 first time. You have to like 10 viewings before I can elevate you to 5. But this one I gave a straight away 5. It likes to play with genre here, and there's an element of humor involved in the country bumpkin versus the slick city cop dynamic, and it creates this internal tension within the investigation. One example: the local detectives clearly arrest the wrong person when they pick up they don't really explicitly say what's wrong with him, but he's had some trauma in his past. He's sort of mentally handicapped. And then they use some questionable, we'll call interrogation methods to coerce a confession out of him because they know they can, and they're convinced because he likes to follow women and stare at them. He's weird and an outsider, and they want to blame him, and they say it's a hunch. He can look at him and he knows, but the outside detective is like shrugging, and their methods are so over the top. And they're cruel to a point that it's just a very bleak type of humor. The outside detective is telling them he's not the guy, that you have the wrong one, and eventually he does prove it, and they have to release it. But they're mad about it because he showed them up. It's like simpletons versus the civilized, dim versus the educated. The weight of the investigation eventually breaks them all down until they're all desperate just to find an answer. You see this later on in the film when the city cop breaks and has his own moment where he's sure. He doesn't have the proof, but he's sure this guy is the one doing it. And he's ready to throw him in front of a train just to have an ending. I kind of recoil when I hear police procedural. Bong Joon-ho uses the genre to play with perspective. It's about who sees and how they see. And I mentioned they talk about hunches all the time because they have the evidence is so small, so they're going with their hunches and second sight, but they're sure of these hunches. They're as true to them as any real evidence. Even as the rural detectives feel slighted by the presence of the city cop, all of the men disregard the sight of women. And this is where the thing went over the top for me, and this is how Bong Joon-ho really gets into the heart of it. It's about the evil of men and the everyman's daily disrespect and misogyny for women. And this is spread throughout the story in small ways. And then, of course, there's the obvious narrative of a serial killer who's stalking women on nights when it rains and raping and killing them. So there's this constant and regular objectification and dismissal of the opinions of women. They're only useful when they're attractive and willing to indulge the male fantasy. Because even when at one point the female detective that's on this team, she dresses up to lure the killer to follow her so that they can ambush him. They still can't help but undermine her. The way she looks is like, oh, you clean up nice when you want to, like you're not always so ugly. And at one point, the same detective discovers that the local radio station plays a song every night that a woman is killed, and it's an obscure song, so it can't just be coincidence. But they immediately dismiss it because, oh, that's cute. That's not real evidence. Even as much as I said that they go by their hunches all the time and there's no logic really behind. He's like, I look at the guy and I just know. I should mention Detective Park is played by Bong Joon-ho regular Song Kang-ho. He's the star of Host and Parasite. And he's rightfully celebrated for his performance in Parasite, but to me, this movie, he's giving a next level performance. He's the main proponent of the dismissing of the women, and his relationships with women are all pretty toxic. But he grows in small ways throughout the movie and throughout the investigation, and you see the toll that the investigation takes on him most personally, because you hear him confess his fears and doubts to his... I'm unclear about whether she was like just a girlfriend or if she was at the time sort of a prostitute. Sort of the way he treats her is like a prostitute, so maybe it doesn't even matter. But it's through her conversations with her that you feel how it's breaking him down, and how the things he keeps seeing on his case are inciting change in his personality. And because of that, he ultimately receives our empathy, even though we've seen him do pretty terrible things throughout this movie. It feels like this is a movie that David Fincher would have seen and just digested whole. It's a lot like Zodiac. I mean, there's some, like the pace of it and the dark humor and how it's
also it sounds like there are elements of the girl with the dragon tattoo as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even you go in 7, like there's a lot of things that you could see being exchanged here.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at Zodiac specifically because it's got this constant slow building dread that's mixed with some very witty dialogue between the characters that keeps you from really just being kind of oppressed by the darkness of this story.
Well, I the thing that always has impressed me with him as a director is I always think there's a specific scene in The Host. I won't describe it, but I will say, like, it's one singular shot. And I always remember how I went from, as the shot was beginning, to, like, laughing out loud because I thought it was so funny, to me bursting in tears because it was so emotional. And I think that's his particular gift, is that he's able to, like, literally in the space of a single shot, go from you laughing out loud to, like literally sobbing. And I think that is very unique amongst filmmakers. And I haven't seen this one, but it sounds like it's one I should definitely add to my list and that I should have watched. But it wasn't my highest unseen, unfortunately.
That's a shame. I think you would have liked this one.
Yeah. Shall we get to mine?
Yes, please. Let's hear what you have to say.
I didn't like Old Boy, everyone. I did not like it at all. I can see myself in 2003 when I'm 26 watching this and really digging it. But the problem is now I'm an old man of like 47. I just did not connect with this movie in any way. Like, my argument is that I grew up reading about all of them, like the most famous movies that were ever made. And when I finally got to watching them, my previous knowledge never ruined my experience. And in fact, if anything, it made me more invested in seeing how the plot gets to these things that I already knew about. With Old Boy, I think it may be a case where the spoiler that I knew actually did ruin my appreciation from it, because I kept going like, well, that's fucking stupid. Is this actually leading up to that? The way they're getting there is even worse than I imagined. And it just at no point was I like, oh, wow, this is really cool and badass. And I think that's ultimately the thing that just pushed me away more than anything else. Like the scene where he bites off the head of the live squid. That didn't make me go like, oh, cool, he really did that. It was like, you guys, you could have faked that, you know. That didn't need to be a live squid. You could have just used a gelatin squid and it would have been the same shot. Like, it's almost the opposite of the reaction I had when we watched Pink Flamingos for our 1972 episode. Because in that case, it was like, they're doing all of this outrageous stuff. But to me, the film had a spirit of like a bunch of young queer kids having a lot of fun pushing the buttons of the establishment. Whereas this felt cynical to me, like, oh, we'll do this and it'll get us a lot of attention and, you know, people will think we're, you know, very, you know, outrageous. And I didn't fall for it. Apparently I'm the only one. Apparently everyone else thinks this movie is amazing and special, and it was my highest unseen on IMDb. And if you love it, you know, that's great. I didn't get it.
The genre of movie which this falls squarely into is not my favorite. I'm not.
That's the thing was, I love revenge movies. And I even I love Sympathy for Lady Vengeance. So you can't even say like I'm biased against the filmmaker. Like I have loved his other work.
I do prefer that as well to Old Boy. It's been a long time since I watched it originally. It's a movie I never really wanted to revisit. I must have seen this in the theater at the time, and I think I had the reaction that you thought you would have had was mine, and I had some enthusiasm for it in the moment. And talking about it, I think it was a style of movie. I certainly hadn't seen much of Korean cinema at all at this point. I think I supported it as the new and something I hadn't quite seen before. Now, 20 years removed, I've seen this story in a lot of other places. It's oppressive in the way that it goes about its business, we'll say.
Well, and it's like, it's very, because sometimes when a movie is so influential that if you didn't see it first and you only know its influences, you look back at it like for instance, like when I watched the big famous hallway fight, I was like, well, I've seen the same hallway fight in other places, only they did it a lot better than this. Mm-hmm. And I know this is the first one, and I know this is the thing they're all ripping off, but they ripped it off better. They made it better than what it actually is.
I'll just say that maybe part of me wants to leave my 2003 reaction in place.
Yeah.
And not revisit it. Because like I said, I was never drawn back to it. I kind of had my fill. And maybe I'm just going to leave it there.
Good. I think that's enough on Old Boy. Yeah. For my most nagging, I went and watched a movie that is actually, it's one of those one-word titles that is universally known as a joke. Like it's in the same level of like Ishtar. But that was why it was my most nagging, is because I should have watched this movie, this legendarily bad movie, by now. I can't believe it's taking this podcast for me to finally watch Geely.
Sometimes I think you're involved with bad things. Are you?
Oh, ma. Beneath a rugged exterior, Larry Sheely was a nice guy.
Are you?
You know me, I'm gonna be fine. Putting on a good show. That's professional. He's just been given his big break.
There's a certain witness with psychological defects, and I want him held on to.
But he's about to get...
He's kidding.
An even bigger surprise.
Hello. I'm sorry. Do we know each other?
Not yet. I guess Lewis would feel more comfortable if there were two independent contractors working on this.
I want you to work with her, and I want you to watch her. She will be watching you.
Let me tell you something. In every relationship, there's a bull and a cow. I'm the bull. You're the cow. You got that?
Yeah, I got it. Bull cow.
Read to me, Larry.
What?
Oh, come on, Larry. Read to me.
And what I found out is that I had two very distinct but opposite reactions. And the first was, I don't think this is as bad as I was led to believe it is. And I can totally see why this completely ended Martin Brest's career.
Which is a huge shame, by the way.
Yeah, oh yeah, it is. But I think the issue is that this is a textbook example of why a great director is sometimes always going to be at his best when he's working on someone else's script. Because I think the huge problem with Geely is that it was like the first film since his first film where Martin Brest directed a script that he wrote. That is the huge problem with it, is because he was so close to it that he couldn't see things as the writer, that as the director, that if it was someone else's script, he would have been like, oh no, we have to cut that out. No one's going to believe that. Oh no, we have to take that out. Like he didn't have that self-editing function. So there are things that actually work really well in the movie, but there are other things that are just like, why? And I think the thing that most fascinating thing about me was the decision to cast Ben Affleck, because he's completely wrong for the movie. The main character is supposed to be a likable tough, and at no point is Ben Affleck likable. But more bizarrely is that he already played this role. in Chasing Amy. And so you have a memory of him actually being likable and good in a much lower budgeted movie, a movie that literally I think cost something like 1/300th of what, Geely cost. And it creates this disconnect of like, why does he suck so much in this when it's basically the same story of this other movie that we know he was good in? And it really creates this uncanny valley between the movies. But the thing that I would say, like, if you haven't watched it, the reason to check it out is Jennifer Lopez, because she's fucking great in this movie. Like, this is actually probably one of my top 5 Jennifer Lopez roles, just in terms of like her acting. And I think it's part of the problem with the movie is that Martin Brest, the screenwriter, was so invested in the story he wanted to tell that he never realized that the chemistry between Lopez and Affleck, it doesn't allow for the story to progress the way it progresses. Because she, like, in case you don't know, the plot is the small-time stooge who is forced to kidnap an autistic man, the brother of a DA, who is prosecuting their boss. They hire Jennifer Lopez to basically babysit him while he's babysitting this guy he kidnapped. And it turns out she's a lesbian, and he's in love with her for obvious reasons. She's Jennifer Lopez. And we're supposed to buy that eventually she reciprocates those feelings and falls in love with him too. But at no point in the movie do we actually buy that happening. It's one of those things that happens because Martin Brest, the screenwriter, decided it was going to happen. And I think that's ultimately what kills the movie. That and the fact that they spent way too much fucking money on it, even though you don't actually see that money on screen. All of it was basically Brest reshooting everything because they reshot the ending, the original ending. Affleck's character is killed. And that would have been a disastrous ending, but the ending they come up with, where she ends up like picking him up off the street and they drive to California together for an unknown future, is easily just as bad. On the one hand, I don't think it's bad enough to deserve its reputation, and there are even reasons to watch it. But also, like I said, I completely understand why Hollywood after this was like, yeah, we're not going to hire you to make any more movies, Martin.
Well, curiously enough, it's not even my least favorite Martin Brest movie.
Meet Joe Black?
Yes.
It's the way he paces it is so glacial, but at the same time, it works for me. I don't know why. Like, this movie should bore the shit out of me. It should be 90 minutes. And there's no excuse being 2.5 hours long. But for whatever reason, I think it may just because, like, for the opposite thing is that, for me, the chemistry between Brad Pitt and Claire Forlani is such that, like, I don't mind spending 2.5 hours with these characters staring at each other because I like staring at them too.
It was a totally silent theater when Brad Pitt gets hit by the car.
Yeah.
And he flies around the traffic like a ping pong ball.
Yeah.
And I just start laughing hysterically. I was miserable watching that movie in the theater. And when that happens, everyone goes silent, and I'm just laughing myself silly like a drunk lunatic. This movie is abominable, and I need someone else to recognize it.
I will say, when I saw it in the theater, everyone in the theater laughed. We all recognized that it was actually supposed to be funny.
It was a largely packed crowd, and it was like dead silent. I'm like, what is happening? But anyway, yes, it is sort of mystifying that the guy that can produce Beverly Hills Cop and Midnight Run can also have the lows. He's not operating. Sometimes the directors want to stretch and seek out some other genre for their misfires. But this is the same highway.
Yeah.
And for some reason, it's like one of those magical things about movies, and that you can put together all these pieces and the same guy with the same tone and elements can create Midnight Run. And then just a little bit later, you can take the tone or the attempted tone and the same general elements and make Geely.
And I think the disappointing thing for me is that fact that Jennifer Lopez is so good in it that it's sort of because the movie is sort of viewed as a disaster, a lot of people might not be exposed to like what is actually a really good performance.
You know, I think we have a good dynamic on these podcasts, and this particular category, we're going to see why I had this thought right now. So for your most shameful shame, you picked another notoriously bad 2003 movie. I picked a movie that came out just after I'd left film school, and it was the new film school darling that people all wanted to talk about. And because I was just out and I was kind of over the film school films,
Yep.
I didn't make an effort to see it. I watched Goodbye Dragon Inn by Tsai Ming Lang. We're changing countries again. Gonna butcher some more. I'm gonna have the whole world mad at me by the end of this episode. I haven't seen any of his other films. I have very complicated feelings about this movie. I will try to do my best to anger as few people as possible, because I know this is a beloved film, and I'm not going to say I didn't love it. Okay. So it's a dark, rainy, and especially cinematic night in Taipei, and the focus of the movie is an old, decrepit cinema that's about to shut down, and it's showing King Hu's martial arts classic Dragon Inn on its last night. It's a sparsely attended showing. There's just a scattering of people throughout the audience. We see later that some of the actors return to watch themselves on the screen. It felt like a majority of the movie is spent watching the partially disabled ticket lady walking down long corridors. There's a scene in which a bunch of dudes pee in urinals for a length of time that would have put the Naked Gun scene to shame. Beyond that, there is a narrative. I'm not going to say it's a totally vapid production that's only about the way things look, but there's no dramatic action itself. So the question I had when I was done and I was taking my notes is, so why is this a movie? I think it's 37 minutes into the film before we hear any dialogue. It's quintessentially a movie about movies and the experience of watching movies, specifically movies in a theater. When Goodbye Dragon is released in 2003, the act of going to the movies as a communal spiritual behavior, I think certainly had begun to recede back into the 20th century. So this theater, which is leaky and dark, falling into disrepair, houses these ghosts of the communal behavior, of the actors who are on screen, of all of the people who have visited this, the sad and lonely people who work the ticket booth and run the projector. It's all about people looking at movies, people looking at movies. There's a lot of looking and staring because the camera does not move. It is almost always static. Any camera movement is like a shock to the system. That frame lingers on the sights and sounds of a movie theater. To say it's slow is doing a disservice to slow movies. This is non-existently paced. It's like a visual dirge.
And you don't even get Brad Pitt staring at Claire Forlani.
No. We are meant to feel and linger and live in the images. If I revisit the film, I would have a slightly different reaction because my thoughts about it have changed even since I've watched it. I have truly begun to appreciate what the director set out to accomplish. So you just surrender all expectations for what narrative needs to be in order to be a movie. That was a failure of me as a movie watcher, perhaps because I've become lazy in expecting things to happen now that I'm not in film school anymore and studying to a degree that I would appreciate this more without needing to be reminded when I came around to the movie, I started to conceive of the whole thing as a dreamscape and connecting that to cinema as the dream factory. And so the theater then is the realm of dreams. And in this dream, we're meant to see that this dream is dying. There's always light, there's always a little bit of hope. So we're seeing there's still a celebration of the movie that's on the screen. The old actors that have come, you learn that these are the actors that are in the movie. They're sharing the movie with their grandchild. They're passing down this love of cinema to someone else. And these emotional connections that people had aren't disappearing, but they're shifting and changing just as time goes by. We adjust our expectations for cinema. And in 2023, post-pandemic, we're seeing a lot of the independent houses close, and everyone is trying to figure out what is cinema, reevaluating how we watch movies. And so I felt a lot of this movie had sort of a renewed relevance. For that, I came to appreciate what he wanted to accomplish and what he wanted to convey through these images. And again, if I had seen this in film school, I would have had fantastic conversations that would have revealed so much about human nature and cinema itself, capital C, and I'm sure that the film students of 2003, 2004 would have revered this movie.
I think from your description of it, I think this may be a film that you have to actually see in a theater.
I think it would definitely help. It's so hard with all the distractions. You just need that one-to-one connection to the screen.
Yeah. So we're going to, I think, probably one of our favorite categories now.
What the what?
What the what? What the what?
What the what? What the what? What what? Sometimes with when you're going by the IMDb, the release date can be a bit, because sometimes like they'll count like, oh, it screened once at this film festival the year before, so we'll use that. So, but this one actually is difficult to pinpoint because it's a 2003 release. But it could be also considered a 2004 release or a 2007 release. But it was filmed in 2001 as The Devil and Daniel Webster, and is credited to a fictional filmmaker named Harry Kirkpatrick. But it was actually directed by Alec Baldwin, who walked away from it when it was shut down in mid-production due to budget issues. And the unfinished film was bought by a man named Bob Yari, who finished it and released it years later without Baldwin's participation. Baldwin has since disowned the film and explained that the title was changed to Shortcut to Happiness because the end result was so different from his original version of the story that it could no longer be considered an adaptation of the famous Stephen Vincent Benet short story.
On the New York literary scene, it's publish or perish, and Jabez Stone is dying a little every day.
I don't even have enough money to buy dog food.
We got a 201, desperate writer wielding unpublished manuscript.
Mr. Webster, it's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Jabez Stone, and I am a writer.
What do you want?
All right, sir, why don't you come with me? Please. That's my book in there. I'd like you to read it. I think I have something important to say.
2 minutes.
I sent you a manuscript.
Do you have any idea how many submissions I receive in a year, Mr. Stone?
I have something out of the ordinary.
They're 214 pages. Go home and write something better.
Look at yourself. You'd sell your soul.
Until...
Can I help you?
Question is, can I help you?
a devilish stranger appears.
More than anything else on Earth, what do you want?
Success! I want success!
That's it!
Yes.
10 years. It's standard contract. 10 years, and then I take what's mine.
Well, what happens after that?
Look at it this way. How much worse can it get? Are you in?
I'm in.
But now...
Mr. Stone, so good to see you.
Are you famous? Jabez Stone, so nice to meet you.
What about the book?
I've already ordered a first printing of 100,000 copies.
Good God.
We've just got time for a quick celebration.
They told me
he recognizes he did a really terrible job, and he's decided to take advantage of the fact that, you know, the film was taken away from him to pass the buck and avoid the credit for what's on screen. But I think is that I've seen enough good movies cut into bad movies and then re-released as a good director's cut to be able to spot the difference between, you know, what a director shot and how the producer used it. And so, like, the Love Conquers All version of Terry's Gilliam Brazil, you can still see the bones of the film that Gilliam wanted to make and enjoy glimpses of the moments that make his version, you know, a really great movie. And this isn't the case with Shortcut to Happiness, whose flaws would have been just as egregious if Baldwin had been able to finish the film on his own terms. All of its major mistakes were made on set by Baldwin, and while the cheesy post-production effects used to make it a finished film don't help, they aren't the problem, and there's nothing about how the film flows that suggests its narrative has been messed with. It always feels like the film that Baldwin wanted to make. And there was a great idea at the heart of the film, one that you can easily understand appealed to an actor like Baldwin, whose serious ambitions were often undermined by his matinee idol looks and flair for light comedy. But instead of making him the right person for the job, it instead proves how his desire to bring it to life was more driven by his narcissism than anything else. The movie takes Benet's short story about a man who goes to court to win back the soul he sold to the devil, and it updates it to then contemporary Manhattan, where Baldwin plays a wannabe novelist named Jabez Stone, who in the course of one day loses his job, finds out a friend of his has sold a novel for $190,000, goes completely broke, has a laptop which contains the manuscript for his work in progress stolen, and finally, he accidentally kills an old woman when he throws his manual typewriter out of his apartment window. At this, the lowest moment of his life, he's greeted by the devil, played by Jennifer Love Hewitt, who is in full, Heartbreakers mode, who offers him 10 years of success if he gives her his soul. He agrees, they have sex, and then he enjoys a meteoric rise as a novelist whose books are bestsellers and win awards, even though the critics and his fellow writers think they're terrible. 5 years pass quickly before Jabez realizes he's literally halfway to hell and that his success hasn't actually translated into happiness. Eventually, Daniel Webster, who's played by Anthony Hopkins, who we learn has been apparently fighting the devil for centuries or millennia and keeps her cut-off tail in his office, but who has now decided to live as a world-famous publisher, agrees to be his counsel in a trial with the devil to win back his soul. And it's weird that Baldwin insists that the film's final title doesn't represent the film he planned, because its whole thesis is that if you attempt to create art that doesn't have soul, you may end up financially successful, but you'll be artistically and spiritually bankrupt. And the actual phrase "shortcut to happiness" is used at least 6 times throughout the film. It's obvious that this was to be his mea culpa for his terrible, soulless movies he starred in that sold tickets but made him feel ashamed for himself. But because of this, watching the film takes on a train wreck sensation, as he argues that it's far more important to create work that pleases critics and your fellow artists more than the common riffraff, while he's creating a work that couldn't please anyone. As a director, Baldwin knows just enough to make the film feel like a high-budget Hallmark movie. Hilariously, his inspiration mostly seems to be Bonfire of the Vanities, the Brian De Palma movie, which is a film that didn't work despite being directed by one of the greatest directors of all time. His biggest mistake is casting himself in the lead role, which is appropriate in the success years, but hilariously wrong for when he's supposed to be an unlucky schmuck. This is highlighted in bold yellow with all caps, in the scene after he and the devil have had sex. He asks if the devil has started, if the deal has started, and she tells him, "When was the last time you had sex with someone who looked like me? You're on the clock, buddy." Of course, anyone with 2 eyes can see that the loser she just insisted couldn't usually score, Jennifer Love Hewitt, was actually, at that moment, married to Kim Basinger. Baldwin clearly believed he could act his way out of looking like one of the most fuckable men on the planet, which is a huge sign of how bad his overall judgment is throughout all aspects of the film. He has great actors like Hewitt, Dan Aykroyd, and Kim Cattrall giving amateur theater farce performances because his understanding of tone and pacing is more stage-bound than cinema-based. Hewitt especially struggles in her courtroom scenes, but in ways where you want to blame Baldwin for not giving her the note she needed. Only Hopkins manages to mostly get away unscathed, but that's mostly due to the Anthony Hopkins-ness of his performance than anything else. Visually, the film is flat and uninspired. Hewitt's devilish wardrobe is really the only highlight, and even it seems underwhelming when compared to her vixenish Coles and Heartbreakers, or the devilish outfits Elizabeth Hurley wore in Bedazzled, which was released just a year before this was filmed. Despite its failures, though, I never actually felt bored watching Shortcut to Happiness. There was never a moment where I was like, wait, is this actually good? But the things that made it terrible just made it more compelling. Like, it was an unintended satire about what happens when you give a very handsome man who wants to be loved as a genius $30 million to make a movie about how much it sucks to be rich, famous, successful, and fucking Jennifer Love Hewitt, if it also means critics think you're a hack.
But is it better or worse than Bedazzled?
It's hard to, like, because Bedazzled at least has Elizabeth Hurley in those outfits.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's its only redeeming feature. And it is, like, I remember actually really liking Bedazzled when I saw it when it came out. And it was only, like, I can think about 10 years later when I rewatched it that I realized how bad she actually was in the role. Like, I was just like, I think it was a case where I saw the wardrobe and I didn't see the performance. And now all I can see is the performance. And yeah. So, but I would still say at least Bedazzled feels like a complete coherent movie. And Shortcut to Happiness just feels like a movie that Alec Baldwin wanted to make so people took him seriously. Like, if you are fascinated by the idea of, like, what happens when actors decide to become directors and it doesn't work, this is a really good one to pick.
Carrot Top's in it.
Yeah.
It's my contribution to the conversation. He's at the bottom of the cast list. He's playing himself.
Yeah.
And for my What the What, we're traveling over to France. That's right. For Love Me If You Dare.
Julian and Sophie were two mischievous kids. Who invented an outrageous game. Whoever held the tin box would meet the other's dare. Shh. The rule was simple. Are you game or not? But as they grew older, the stakes grew higher. The dares became dangerous. Until the gamble was more than just a game. It was an obsession. Better than sex. Better than love.
Sophie! Juliette!
Better than life itself. From Paramount Classics and the visionary mind of director Jan Samuel comes France's hit comedy. For better, for worse, for now, and forever. Love Me If You Dare.
In French, it was called Jeux d'enfants, or Child Games. That's actually a far better title than Love Me If You Dare, because... And maybe it's the way it was sold, but it's certainly the DVD cover and the poster certainly make it look like it wants to be a rom-com. And it is not a rom-com. It is a anti-rom-com. This is a story about two insufferable humans who screw up each other's lives repeatedly over a period of about 15 years. Maybe 20 years. It goes on for a long time. They start playing this game of dare as small children. And they take turns escalating these dares into felonies by the time they're older. This movie, I wrote this note down as I was watching it. It saw Amelie as a cautionary tale of happiness and sought to eradicate all pleasantries. The two movies actually do share a similar sense of sort of that French offbeat observational humor. But I sort of conceived it as there's a scale of good and evil, like playful, snarky, and Amelie goes one direction and it goes in the entire other way on the same spectrum. Marianne Cotillard is the star of the movie as Sophie, and a French gentleman named Guillaume Canet something plays Julian. He is milquetoast French guy up against Marianne Cotillard, and whatever he does is fine because you can't take your eyes off her.
Yeah.
She's not just that much more attractive, she's just a more engaging screen presence.
Yeah.
So
she's Marianne Cotillard.
Yeah. So the movie opens with Julian's mom dying of breast cancer. And to distract from his personal trauma, Sophie initiates this game of Dare. I think it's her. I'm sort of foggy on exactly when it starts because I hadn't quite figured out where the fuck this movie was going when the mom started dying of cancer and everything is miserable. And I'm looking at this pastel pink and purpley box cover going, what is happening? So they use this game as a weapon against their loss and anxiety. Whenever something bad happens, the other one walks up and dares them to do something stupid or annoying or just ribald. It's runs the gamut when they're, and then as I said, it gets worse when they're older. But at a certain point, they do this to distract from the fact that they're clearly in love with each other. Allowing proximate emotional closeness would eradicate everything that their relationship has been built on for all these years. So they just keep inflicting more damage on each other and pretty much everyone around them. This movie could have worked if they were less insufferable. They're really just ciphers without individual personalities because all their personality is delivered through this game. We barely get the sense that they have really connected until the very end when she is in full annihilation mode. And again, Cotillard makes this movie worth watching. More than it deserves, we'll say. Like Amelie, there's a sense of magical realism that really doesn't go with the dark themes that we're getting into here. It tries to use a sort of high school stage production style performance as an aside to sort of reenact subtext and create this playful contrast with the grim relationship that we're getting on screen. The irony just kind of falls flat. And the ending of the film, which I won't get into because it does go to a kind of surprising place by the end. So I don't want to take that from you. But it left me very cold. Even this movie that sort of embraces nihilism, you want some kind of meaning around it. You need something. You need something from these characters to connect. And I just don't think nihilism is a good central focus of a movie unless you're using it as a punchline in a far superior Coen Brothers movie.
Yeah.
And still, having watched this movie and thinking about it, there's something interesting about it. And I'm not quite able to put my finger on it. And I think maybe it's because of its whole inventive approach to the anti-rom-com. In that way, it's kind of a tease, and I want to like it more than I do. They built a movie around a game of Dare and then asked us to care about these characters. They're awful, constantly.
there are, I think the two places where it tends to be most egregious is in art house cinema and in horror cinema, where there is this idea by the screenwriter that conflict in and of itself is compelling. That if you show two people fighting, that will always be more exciting than if you just show two people getting along. And the problem, especially in horror, is that what happens then is that you hate these two people who are fighting. So then when bad stuff starts happening to them, you don't give a shit because they're awful people who just fight. And I think it's a crutch that screenwriters go to because it's much more easier to write to write unlikable characters. And I think actors love to play unlikable characters. So when you have like a director and two actors who are like getting this, like are celebrating the fact that they are like, you know, oh, these characters are so unlikable, isn't it great? Yeah, it's great for you on set. You're having a lot of fun. But we, as the viewer, have to watch this movie, and all we're seeing are two assholes who ultimately, like, and you can be a complete asshole and still be compelling, and still be a compelling character. But I think that takes a lot of work, and you have to do the work. And if you expect us to just care about two characters because they're the main characters and they're on screen, then you're fucked if it becomes a case where we actively dislike them. And while you were talking, I went to the IMDb page and read basically the synopsis of the film, so I know how it ends. And it's an extremely ambivalent ending in that it actually shows you two different endings at the same time, as if the movie is going, yeah, we don't care how it ends. Yeah, we.
It's a tonal thing too that put me off a little bit.
Yeah.
In similar movies, I can come up with a handful of films that use a similar tactic. It's certainly not the same because, number one, this is French. And that's a whole different sensibility. But in terms of American movies, you think of something like War of the Roses.
But I would argue that works as well as it does, is because you have the intro of the couple where they're happy, and you see them happy, and you like those characters. And so it takes on a tragic, farcical comedy sort of thing as they become more hateful.
The ones that are successful have a defined sense of humor. It wants to incorporate lightness into individual scenes, but there's never a through line. There's never a consistent commitment to humor. If it's black, it is so dark you can't see through.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's just implied, like you're supposed to supply the humor that's not there. Like, oh, isn't it funny watching these people dare each other to do increasingly dangerous and stupid and annoying things? And the answer is no.
Just reading the synopsis, and I don't know if this plays watching the movie, but reading the synopsis, reading that last paragraph about how the film ends, in his head he always had this ending for a movie. And then he created a movie to justify that ending.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you say that, because I have the same comment about the next movie I'm going to talk about.
For my wild card, I'm going to talk about one of the only movies that I actually enjoyed watching for this episode, but it had a huge, massive flaw that I couldn't forgive to give it basically the play it again status. And you went from from Korea to France. Now we're going to where I live. We're going to Canada. This is a Canadian movie, and the biggest problem with it is that, oh boy, does it look like a Canadian movie. And it's Foolproof, starring Ryan Reynolds.
10 floors, 252 steps. You've got 30 seconds to bypass the alarm.
He isn't just good. he is the best.
People are starting to think you're a knob.
Really?
Kevin Kraft is an amateur.
It's about the art of the crime, not about moving stolen crap.
Who makes a game out of crime.
Kaboom! Our plan has lockpicking, circuitry, chemistry, not to mention some pretty high-end hardware to burn through that safe. Kevin Kraft.
I was robbed. They took the envelope.
The envelope?
But a master thief is turning this game into a real heist.
As you know, I stole your plans.
We're not really criminals.
No shit. You're going to work for me.
We should just go to the cops. We'll just explain. We planned the robbery. I'm no lawyer, but I'm pretty sure we're guilty of something. What's the job?
$44 million in capital bonds, and we're going to steal them.
685. But I never gave you the number 6, Rob. I wrote them down. You said 68521. Oh.
We're on a heist with Gilligan.
You might want to exhale first. Go!
If it weren't for the fact that it looks like a made-for-TV Canadian movie, even though it actually was released theatrically, it would actually be a fun heist movie. It stars Reynolds as a guy who, with his 3 friends, have this unusual hobby where they plan foolproof heists. And they don't actually, execute the heist, but they just plan them to the point where they know that if they wanted to, they could execute them and not get caught. But the problem is that the plans for their latest project are stolen by a famous thief played by David Suchet, who is probably best known for playing Hercule Poirot on the for the BBC or PBS in the States, where most people have seen them. And he threatens to send the plans, which have their fingerprints on them, to the police unless they agree to plan another heist for him, which involves switching $20 million worth of bearer bonds with counterfeits in a bank safe. And then from there, the film takes the expected twists and turns. Reynolds makes it feel like a real movie as much as he can. And Suchet does a good job with the villain role. He could play in his sleep. And I like the fact that it's one of the rare examples of a Canadian-made genre film that actually acknowledges that its characters are Canadian. Like the last time I could think of something like that is The Silent Partner from 1978. But again, the problem is that as filmed by Derek Rogers, it's so overlit and it so looks like a TV movie that you just wonder why they ever released it in theaters. And I think it's a case where it probably was meant to be a TV movie, but then Van Wilder came out and they were like, oh, this Ryan Reynolds guy might have some box office pull, so we're going to release this to theaters. And some people actually saw this TV movie in the theater. I wasn't one of them in 2003, but I watched it now. And if you're looking for a dumb, fun heist movie, you could do a lot worse.
All right. That's nice and short and sweet to wind down the evening. I like that. I'll try and do similarly with my only American movie on the list. My wild card is Dead End, directed by Jean-Baptiste Andrea and Fabrice Canepa. Even when they're American movies, I'm going to butcher names.
I was going to say, this doesn't sound like no American movie.
Shit.
Is anybody else just the least bit freaked out that we are the only car on the road right now?
It's 7:30 already, darling.
Yes, I'm aware of that, Laura. I thought we'd come to a junction by now. Stop! I saw a woman in the forest.
Cool, Dad's tripping out.
Oh my God! What the hell was that?
You guys suck.
What are you talking about?
I saw Brad in a car. Who are these people in the woods?
Don't come over here, for God's sake.
I'm pregnant.
I smoke pot.
Talk about a Merry fucking Christmas. What if she gets it first?
This is a kind of a pitch black horror movie, comedy. It's funny at times. Ray Wise is Frank Harrington. So Leland Palmer in Twin Peaks. So this is where Twin Peaks comes back. He is driving his family off to their regular Christmas Eve gathering with the in-laws, and for the first time in all the years that he's been making the drive, he decides to take a shortcut through this very woody, narrow road that's very straight. You have many overheads of the car going straight down this road. He dozes off while driving and wakes up just in time to avoid an oncoming car and spins his off the side of the road. In the car, he has his wife, played by Lynn Shay, his daughter, Alexandra Holden, and her insufferable fiancé, and then their son, who, thank goodness, gets killed early on because he is awful.
Like I'm saying, horror movies about writing conflict and asshole characters instead of writing characters that people care about.
His defining characteristic is that he always has shit to say, which gets old quickly. So when he goes off to masturbate in order to alleviate the tension of people getting knocked off, he gets killed too. So bonus points. After the accident, they encounter a lady in white roaming around with a big gash on her forehead, and a spooky black old-looking hearse car drives by, and things get a little weird. It goes badly for them, as you might expect in a movie called Dead End. Lynn Shay was someone I couldn't place when I was watching the movie, and it took a quick search to realize that I've seen her in about 20 movies.
Yeah. I was going to say, she would be someone I recognize immediately.
I couldn't place her. I'm like, I know this woman really well. But for those that don't know, she's kind of in a few of probably your favorite movies. She's in A Nightmare on Elm Street, Dumb and Dumber. There's Something About Mary. She's a reliable supporting actor, and
well, she's an argument for the benefits of nepotism, because she's really fucking good in all of the movies she's in, but also she was in a lot of those movies because her brother is Robert Shay, who founded New Line Studios.
Mm-hmm. So she's in a lot of sort of low budget horror.
She is the star. Was it Insidious? Isn't that the series where she's the actual star? Yeah.
So this is a solid low budget psychological horror movie. As the trauma increases, as the tension builds, these characters start revealing family grievances and dark secrets, and start telling a lot of truth. Every time they stop to deal with another issue, someone else gets killed. So, and they just keep driving down this road with no end. There's some legit creepy moments, and these bleed into what becomes some very macabre horror comedy. There's a good cheesy and bad cheesy, and unfortunately the bad cheesy kind of comes at the end. But it was a surprising watch for me. I was just scanning through 2003 movies looking for some Hail Marys here at the end to really fill out the roster, because until yesterday I was still going to put Looney Tunes back in action, which entertained me but has some problems. It just didn't feel like it needed to be on the list.
See, but then I could have talked to you about that movie.
Indeed. We were talking about the movie that the guy had an idea in his head for the ending and thought it was really fucking clever, and he was, gosh darn it, gonna hit that beat. Even if it's telegraphed for 10 minutes beforehand, and we're still gonna wind our way there, and when it happens, you're like, of course! We've been waiting for it, thank you! But that's not enough to diminish the affection I have for the rest of the movie, which is fun and quick, and the best part about it is Lynn Shay gets a fantastic scene all to herself. I read somewhere, I don't even know where it was because I jotted this down on my notes, that said that it was if Tennessee Williams wrote a low-budget horror movie. And I don't know if that's entirely true, But the one scene with Lin Shaye, you can feel a bit of Tennessee Williams coming out of her lips. And it's pretty great, and I would recommend watching it just for that scene.
How is Amber Smith in it?
She gets to look hot and damaged. she's just got a big scar across her face, and she's supposed to be, because I don't want to reveal too much about her character, because that gives away the twist!
Yeah, no, that's one I probably will check out, because I am a fan of pretty much everyone involved in it, and I don't mind a bit of cheesiness in a horror film. So yeah, no, I'll definitely
it's
check
fun.
that one.
Like I said, the even the bad cheese doesn't really detract. It's just a little bit of a groaner at the end.
It's already elevated fare compared to what I'm going to talk about now, because for my Play It Again, Sam, I really struggled to come up with a movie that I genuinely, unambiguously liked from beginning to end, that I feel could be elevated to this status. And then I remembered that there was one movie that I watched mostly as a joke because it was one of the movies on my Plexus server for the year 2003. And it's a movie that is the only directorial effort by Chuck Siriano, who is best known as being the composer who has spent most of his career collaborating with Jim Wynorski. So he did the music for Chopping Mall. He's still working with Wynorski on like those like terrible Doggone It movies, and the problem with like the late era Jim Wynorski movies is if anybody who's taken 10 minutes of your life to watch a clip from them, is that he's sort of just riffing on his past successes, which were never really that successful.
Well, where do you go from Chopping Mall? You can't get better than Chopping Mall. What do you want the guy to do?
I'm not even talking.
What do you want the guy to do? He's only going to make worse movies. It's like Orson Welles directing Citizen Kane. What do you do?
I'm not even talking about Chopping Mall. I'm talking about the movies he was making 20 years after Chopping Mall.
Oh, well, I can't defend
where basically he would just take a bunch of hot girls and film them I'm thinking of like the Bear Wench Project, and 1 and 2 and 3.
But the names are funny.
The names are funny, but they're actually not a lot of fun to watch. But the problem is now he's making those films with the exact same cast 20 years later, in some case 40 years later, but there's also no nudity and no sex. So it's just the parts that you sat through to get through to the nudity and sex without any of the other stuff. And so it's very painful. And so that's why Babarellas, which is my Play It Again, Sam, feels like a relief, because it's an extremely low budget, one person basically did everything, nudie cutie comedy that plays more like it was made in the 50s and 60s than it was in 2003.
Now, for your viewing pleasure, we again bring you that diabolical planetary predator, Queen Sartanica. Today, unknown to the inhabitants, she will ravish and destroy a small planet, known to them by the quaint name of Earth. And you know what that means. Yes, her insidious strategy will be, as always, to harvest the sexual voltage from the planet's dominant species, human beings, rendering them completely helpless. And we're bringing it all to you on Plunder That Planet.
So it's a strange, I found it, and I know I'm going to be the only person who feels this way, but it was a strangely charming movie to me, because it was all about sort of delivering the goods in a way that actually felt entertaining, as opposed to a lot of movies like this, which are just like, we're just going to pretend to have a plot until we show the boobs, and then we're going to get back to pretending to have a plot until we show some more boobs, and then the movie's over, and and you really didn't enjoy any of it. And in this case, Barbarella's is the rare film where I enjoyed it when it was doing really stupid, silly plot stuff, and I especially enjoyed it when it was doing these really like inventive like scenes where they showed the boobs. And I just felt like a throwback in all of the right ways. The plot, as much as you can call it a plot, is that the universe has gathered together to watch the popular TV show Plunder That Planet, where Queen Sartanica will attempt to take over and destroy Earth by draining its inhabitants of their sexual voltage. To do this, she needs to find someone who serves as the sexual nexus, and believes she's found probably a likely suspect in an all-female band called Top Heavy. And while we're learning about Top Heavy, we learn that Anna, Julie K. Smith, who, if you've ever seen an exploitation movie from the 90s to the early aughts, you've seen Julie K. Smith. She worked a lot with Andy Sedaris, but she's been in everything. You've seen her boobs. And we learned that her G-spot is actually in her left nipple. And the problem is that because of this, she's always getting turned on because she has quick, easy access to her G-spot. And one of her band members has created a special bra to help release the sexual voltage that she builds up from this. And it shoots a laser when she does it. And this is Chekhov's laser bra, because it will pay off later on in the plot. What happens is Sartanica kidnaps the band and attempts to keep them docile by activating their more traditional G-spots. So as the rest of the band is moaning in ecstasy, Anna, because her G-spot isn't being activated because it's in the wrong space, she is able to like think clearly and is able to put on the laser bra and activate her sexual voltage, and they are able to escape from the Satanica's spaceship, which they destroy, and the Earth is saved, and the universe turns around and like, wow, that was a really great episode of that TV show we like. And it's not a good movie, it's not a real movie, but there wasn't a single point of it where I was like, I'm pretty close to turning this off. The whole point from beginning to end, it was really silly. And Siriano, when I say he did it all, like he wrote it, he directed, he produced it, he composed a lot of the songs, and he even did the CGI effects, which are terrible, but in a way I found really charming. Like, it was funny because literally the day after I watched this, I watched Spy Kids 3, Game Over, which I had to turn off because it was so terrible. But I actually thought like that the bad CGI in Barbarella's was more fun and charming than the bad CGI in the Robert Rodriguez movie that played in theaters and was in 3D. I can't justify this choice, but I'm saying that if you are a fan of the old school, like sort of 50s and 60s style of sex comedies, then this might be one to just watch if you come across it, because it's really silly, it's really stupid, but it's also, you know, it works on the level it wants to work at.
Oh God, I have my G-spot's in my left nipple.
Oh God, she's doing the thing again. Oh God, she's doing the thing. She's doing the thing. Oh.
And if you too find yourself watching a crap ton of 2003 movies and you've just lost all faith in humanity,
Chuck Serino will give you Julie K. Smith rubbing her left nipple over and over again. And also, I want to just, after having said that, I also just want to re-add, I didn't like Old Boy.
Yeah. That's all right. I still have another country to piss off. So today, for my play it again, we're going to go to Brazil. Mm-hmm. For a movie called The Man Who Copied, directed by Jorge Furtado.
I guess I'm a pretty normal guy. My name is Andre. This is where I work. Yep, I make photocopies for a living. And these are my friends, Marinas and Cardoso. My dream is to become a cartoonist. And this is the girl that I'm in love with. However, Sylvia, that's her name, doesn't even know I exist. But falling in love can make you do some crazy things. And for a guy who's got nothing, I guess I'm ready to turn things around.
I can't tell you anything else that he's done, and I doubt you've heard of it anyway, because it's all in Portuguese. And there's no way I'm going to pronounce anything in Portuguese tonight. He's a Brazilian filmmaker and doesn't seem to get play anywhere else in the world. If you click on the Letterboxd reviews for his movies, they're almost all in Portuguese. I found this movie by scrolling through Letterboxd last week, just looking, as I said, for another movie to include. So the man who copied is Andre. He's sort of a workaday 19-year-old and a Brazilian spirit of Save the Tiger, Jack Lemmon, maybe. He's a photocopier operator in a small shop that it kind of felt like a bodega, but he's fallen in love with a shop girl who lives across the way from his apartment building, and he watches her very innocently, not in an 80s Lecce Leary way, through the peephole. He watches her through his binoculars, which he saved up a lot of weeks doing photocopying a job. He follows her one day on the bus and finds out where she works. He goes in to buy something for his mother, but he can't afford even the bathrobe that she's trying to sell him. He goes out with his hot coworker. She's defined as the hot coworker. I'm not like saying she's hot. She's hot, but she's like the hot coworker.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, she's out of my league. She's too hot. And he goes out with her and her would-be suitor Cardoso. He and Cardoso suffer from similar afflictions in that he believes he needs more money for this hot girl because she's really hot and hot girls need expensive things. He wants to have enough money to buy something from the girl's shop, so he has a reason to go talk to her. This leads Andre to coming up with a way to using his photocopying skills for some get-rich-quick schemes, and that means printing forged cash and concocting a heist. So that's the premise. Now, what is the movie really like? And it's an unusual thing in that I would normally recoil at voiceover narration that lasts more than a few seconds. Like I have a lot of trouble with someone telling me something that's right there on screen.
Yeah.
This movie begins, it is voiceover narration as far as the eye can see. He's talking about every minute detail of his very minor life. And it's got such a unique poetic sensibility to his voiceover narration that it's just lovely, and you want it to continue because it's also inventive in the way that it goes back and forth in time, and it starts out the movie and he's detailing every aspect of operating the photocopier. He's like, I push this button, and this button, and he's talking about how the only highlight he gets is reading the lines on the books and manuals and whatever he's photocopying, but he never gets more than a few lines in. He's reading a Shakespeare sonnet and he has to turn the page to the next one, and he never finishes anything. He's just reading the individual lines, and he's kind of waxing romantic about the sliver of light that happens when the photocopy, when it doesn't quite reach the end, the book doesn't reach the end of the platter, and there's light that comes up and hits him in the face, and it's just lovely, you know. It was such an unexpected source.
I think I have a theory about narration, and I think that the reason why we generally, like, as viewers tend to like reject it is because there are only two times when it's really used, and one is that when they fucked up and they need something to fix their mistakes. So when we hear it, we automatically go, uh-oh, like something's wrong. They need to tell us this shit because they didn't actually find a way to put it in the movie in an organic way to tell us. Or you have instances like this. The other movie that I always think of, and it's one of my favorite movies of all time, is Charles Grodin's voiceover in 11 Harrow House, where it like that movie, that would be a completely different movie without that voiceover, which is like it sort of imbues it with the spirit of the film. And I think from what I'm talking about, that's the same case with this movie, is that the spirit comes from the narration, as opposed to them going like, oh, you're not going to understand what's happening unless we have the character telling you what's happening.
In this case, it's such a personal voice, and there's such a character to it. I just kind of felt like it was a masterclass in writing, engaging exposition. There is some social critique going on here about the barrier for the Brazilian lower classes to elevate their status, but that's never the focus of the movie. It's really about the relationship that he develops with Sylvia and his need to be he thinks he's being a better human by having more money. There's this relation between money and self-worth. Again, I'm thinking about some of the lovely moments in this film, and when he's not being creepy and watching her across the way in his binoculars, he's narrating how what he can see of her room based on the angle of her closet door, because there's a mirror on the closet door. So there's a flash of images with the various angles of the closet door being turned, and they're different, like wider and narrower based on the angle and what it's showing him of the room. So he's seeing, this is all I can see of her room, and it's just various angles of her bed. So it's very concerned with the way it sounds, the way this dialogue, this internal monologue sounds. It's just a nice, lovely movie about two humans and their relationship, and there's this heist element, but it's never a heist movie.
Well, it's funny because as you were going over the synopsis, I had the IMDb page open, and the trailer was sort of spooling surrounding, and I'm sure they're completely different, like not at all relatable. But I started thinking about our last episode where I talked about Mickey Rooney in Quicksand, a guy in the low end of the economy, basically turning to crime to try to impress this girl who's out of his league. And it's sort of like that. That'll become our running thing. We'll have to find a movie for the next episode that touches on the same thing.
Well, I didn't have a reason to bring up Sidney Lumet, so if I just say Sidney Lumet, does that satisfy the bingo card? I'm not sure. Yeah. I kept looking for a reason to talk about him, but I didn't. I really would have. Sidney Lumet's, if he had made Barbarellas, that would have been really interesting. And probably would have been better than, what was it, Call Me Guilty? The one he made with the... with Vin Diesel. And that wasn't very good, was it? This movie was quite a surprise, and
the trailer makes it look really charming. I'm gonna have to check it out.
It is, and I kind of loved it. It was just a refreshing, pleasant movie to watch, and you can never have enough of those.
Was this another Netflix DVD, or is this available to stream somewhere?
I watched it on YouTube. I could not find it anywhere else.
Hey, that counts.
There was a DVD of it. I was not able to locate one in time. I'm sure if I spent some time with it, I could get my hands on something. But in need of a quick fix, I downloaded a YouTube file and watched it on my Plex, because I can't stand watching movies on my computer because I'm an old person.
Well, we survived 2003. We got through it. So hopefully 1993 will be better.
Our theme song was written and recorded by Preacher Boy. Hear more from the godfather of alt blues at preacherboy.com. You can find us on Twitter at CinemaShame and on Instagram at Cinema Shame Podcast. Cinema Shame lives on the web at cinemashame.wordpress.com. If you have a confession you'd like to make on Cinema Shame, email us at cinemashame@gmail.com or send us a message on Twitter. That's all for today's episode. Tune in next time to hear Allan say...
Had hit the hood of Eastwood, that well-known meanie who like Bellini thought absurd. Soderbergh's claim that famous Harold Ramis was the greatest director in the history of cinema.
You have chosen wise.